Hallelujah. This is session one, and we are looking at health breakthroughs. And we're going to be the first topic is we're going to look at is sleep and beyond. Ways to get better sleep, optimal sleep. And quite honestly, sleep is one of the most powerful ways to build up our bodies. And it's also free in many cases if we can get sleep. So, for this first talk, I think everyone on here probably already knows who I am, but I'm going to just give a little bit of information about family and just some different things. I won't do this for the other talks. I just wanted to, for this first one, to give a little bit of background information. But definitely, I have a family. My wife's name is Ruth, and we have a total of 9 children. And actually, this picture is old. We don't have everyone in the picture. We need to get a new one. So we're definitely pro family, and a lot of these programs are um, kind of geared towards working with families, also individuals, but in a family context as well. Also, just recently, I became a grandpa. My son Izzy and Carly had a little baby girl, and so that's been a blessing. It's kind of some new news for us.
Congrats.
Yeah, it's kind of still hasn't fully registered being a grandpa, but it's definitely a blessing. She's doing really well. So, um, now I wasn't going to put this on here, but a little bit about my background. I used to be most people that know me in Indiana know me for wrestling. Actually, our whole family was in athletics and wrestling. And the reason why I'm bringing this up here is because some of the talks we'll get into on the spiritual side of things, there's definitely some interesting correlation, even though we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. Spiritually speaking, some of the principles and the discipline and the focus that I learned in wrestling definitely carry over, especially when doing deliverance or healing. I know this Psalm 144, verse 1. It's kind of funny because in wrestling, I had it on my headgear to teach my hands, to fight and my fingers for battle. But in a scriptural sense, our hands are used a lot for healing and a whole bunch of other different things. So it's kind of a different type of warfare, but I think there's a lot there that's it correlates to even spiritual things. So I'll be talking about that more later. I'm a naturopath. Here's just a few of the things I've been involved in. I don't have everything up here. A lot of former different things. But basically, a lot of people ask me, what is a naturopath or naturopathy? And basically, what we do is use natural things like diet, sleep, making sure you get optimal sleep, which we're going to be covering today. Are you moving too little, moving too much? Emotional stuff, mental stuff, just natural ways to kind of address some of those things. Are you getting enough sunlight? I know in Indiana right now, I'm not getting enough sunlight, so I need to probably go south or do something else to get some light. Um, Also hydration and sanitation, all that type of stuff we use in as a naturopath to help people meet their goals. Now, I'm part of functional diagnostic nutrition, and it's almost like functional medicine. So we do use a lot of similar testing that an allopathy would use for testing, like blood work or hormones or immunity. I can run really unique labs that some naturopaths can't run, just working with a network of doctors, even with pathogen detoxification or transmitters and things like that. So, um, okay, I got some new people adding on here. Let me add them in here. But let me just kind of flip through here. So in the program, when people are doing the health breakthrough program, even though this talk's going to be more general, the program will go in detail with individual stuff. So I have questionnaires I send people in the program about, questionnaires that help figure out whether it be brain chemistry, region of the brain that may be affected, different systems that may be affected. If need be, there can be physical examination, especially for the thyroid. There's ways to assess it. You could tell if there's inflammation there, nodules or whatnot. Obviously, looking at lab work, if people have lab work, most of the clients I work with do have some form of lab work, and then making a game plan from that. So when it comes to health, it can be super complicated, but I like to make it really simple in 4 categories. Um, two of them kind of have a red background, and two more of a bluish or cooler color. And the reason for that is typically when you deal with mental, emotional, or spiritual things, especially if you're under a lot of stress, they can be majorly catabolic or can eat you up, kind of break you down, especially emotion and mental, even spiritual, and also movement. If you're doing the wrong type of movement, it can be very catabolic, break you down, and actually stress you out if you're doing the wrong type. Now, if you do the right things mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it can actually build you up. Same thing with movement. And we'll talk about movement in one of the sessions in detail, how to use movement as medicine and literally target certain hormones. You can correct hormone imbalances by using very precise exercise. In the middle, though, the diet and rest are very anabolic. Anabolic means it builds you up and it can be restorative. So, and today we're going to be looking at rest. We will look at all these other categories later in different talks. And there are very specific things. I know people have been writing me about like lung health with the whole post COVID stuff. And I know a lot of people are dealing with breathing issues and immune health. So, as the year goes, I'll probably do different talks on relative topics that, may pop up. So, we are looking at sleep and just kind of the circadian rhythm. And there's two hormones that are really important to understand with sleep. Um, First of all, the nighttime hormone that kind of regulates sleep is called melatonin. Then the hormone that wakes us up in the morning is called cortisol. We want to look at these a little bit, and we'll talk more about the graphs about sleep and different phases of sleep and stuff like that here in a second. So you may have heard of tryptophan, and tryptophan makes 5-HTP, and 5-HTP makes serotonin, and serotonin makes melatonin. So all these things kind of help with the circadian rhythm, getting to sleep. Getting to sleep is a different issue than staying asleep, by the way. There's different vitamins and minerals that are needed to stay asleep, and blood sugar issues are a major issue as well. Things like potassium and magnesium can also help you stay asleep if you're having issues with that. So, but if you can't even get to sleep, it's definitely a melatonin issue. And there's a lot that I could say about melatonin. I could do a whole webinar on just melatonin because it is like the new vitamin D or zinc. It literally helps with autoimmune issues, skin issues, different types of cancer. I mean, it is absolutely fabulous. It's also for what's called the cytokine storm and intercellular inflammation. It absolutely is a game changer if people are dealing with a lot of inflammation. And that's why it's so building up. I mean, it actually helps you rest. So tryptophan, some of the foods that are common, it's like different like cheeses and turkey and fish, sunflower seeds, peanuts, pumpkin seeds, soybeans, etc. By the way, if people don't have a milk allergy, they can tolerate it. A lot of people can't tolerate the casein in it, or they're lactose intolerant. But if you didn't have an issue, there has been research with milk and honey that actually has helped people with cardiovascular issues. I actually linked the study below and improve their sleep quite a bit. So some people will actually warm up their milk with a little bit of honey and actually can help because milk actually can help with the release of tryptophan, which again, 5-HTP, serotonin, melatonin. We'll talk about serotonin, melatonin a little bit more later. But here is some characteristics if your serotonin is off. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter, it's a chemical messenger. It's kind of known as the joy well-being neurotransmitter. And actually 95% of it is made in your gut. So a big part of it, people have gut issues. It could be one of the reasons why they're not getting to sleep. You have a loss of pleasure, hobbies, interests, feeling an inner rage or anger, feeling depression, difficulty finding joy from life pleasures, not finding, enjoying favorite foods, not enjoying friendships, relationships, loss of enthusiasm for favorite activities, depression when it's cloudy and when there is a lack of sunlight. And for me, I'm gonna be honest with you, I dealt with this for a long time. I need the darker your skin complexion, the more vitamin D you need, and it makes a hormone issue is almost a light deficiency, unable to fall into deep restful sleep. So serotonin is a major thing, and again, it's a precursor to melatonin. The other major hormone we want to look at is cortisol. Cortisol gets a bad rap, but actually it's a very good hormone. Just needs to be balanced. Cortisol is our anti-inflammatory, so you can think of it as a fire extinguisher. So if there's inflammation in the body, it will kind of knock that out. But there's some bad side effects if your cortisol levels are high, especially when it comes to weight gain. If anyone has the chicken wing in the back of their arm right here, that wiggly thing, or kind of like a shiny tire around their midsection, kind of that visceral fat around the belly. And if it looks shiny, that's like hormonal fat. And that is a lot of times linked to cortisol is responsible for that. And cortisol, when it goes up high, immune system function goes down. So a lot of people are under a lot of stress, and cortisol goes up, they're more likely to get infection and whatnot. So big issue. And again, it's very catabolic. It can reduce bone formation, osteoporosis, osteopenia, a whole bunch of different things. But it also is the hormone that wakes you up. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in the morning. So the normal sleep cycle, and I'll say this is the normal one. We'll look at the abnormal as well. In the morning, the black line is cortisol. So cortisol, again, is the hormone that wakes you up in the morning. But around noon and going to 6 p.m. or whenever the sun is setting, it should drop off. And the white bar, the white line that kind of curves up is melatonin. So again, it's relatively low during the daytime, but it peaks later on around 6, 7 o'clock and throughout the night, and that's why the night is so anabolic. So a few things to mention too is your first 4 hours of sleep from actually the optimal time for sleep in all the studies they've done. Now, this can be slightly different from person to person, but just getting 8 hours of sleep is not good enough, especially people that work third shift and get 8 hours of sleep in the daytime. It does not have the same effect. So really our body is designed to follow the sun in many ways. Now, granted, with the time change and stuff like that, I mean, it's dark here super early, and whatnot. But typically 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. is the ideal sleep time in the summertime. Obviously, sun's up a little bit later, about 10:30 or whenever that sun goes down. It'd be the best time to kind of get to sleep. The first 4 hours is physical repair, and the second 4 hours is psychogenic. I was going to go into a long thing about the different phases of sleep, but I don't think we'll have time to get into every little detail of that. But I can talk to people that are, I'm working with, if they're having issues, we can get into extreme detail on the different phases of sleep and whatnot. Up in the left-hand corner is a Dutch lab. And one of the things that's nice about the Dutch hormone lab, which is an organic acid test, a urine test, it actually tests the cortisol rhythm. You actually take it at around supper time or right before bed. If you get up in the middle of the night, use the restroom. When you wake up, and 2 hours after waking. So it tracks the cortisol, and also it tracks melatonin. It tracks like progesterone, your different estrogens, testosterone. It is comprehensive, and not only that, it tests to see how well your liver is actually clearing estrogen, because it's almost like a pre-screen for breast cancer. Very good lab, and it cuts through all the guesswork with what's going on with cortisol and whatnot. Napping, if people do want to nap, it can be beneficial. It's probably the most optimal about 11 a.m. to 3. And you don't want to go too much more than 20 minutes because you can kind of get a hibernation type effect. But it can be very anabolic for people that are recovering or surgery or injury. Taking naps can be effective. Now, the abnormal sleep cycle is when that stress hormone cortisol, that black line, does not go down at 6 p.m., but it extends further on. It may be, and again, cortisol is what wakes you up. So if it's still out at nighttime, it will keep you awake. And by the way, if someone has an infection or injury and the body pumps in cortisol, it can wake them up. So that's a clue when we look at the Dutch lab. If someone has evening cortisol that's really high, it could be possibly an infection somewhere in their body. So a lot of the athletes I used to work with, I would tell them like, hey, you got to get to bed. If you work out, and especially if it's an anabolic workout and you want to see the benefit from that workout, you got to, that first 4 hours is critical for physical repair. If you don't get to bed, because a lot of athletes stay up super late, 2, 3 o'clock doing whatever, they literally their workout scratched if they're staying up that late. So, but anyways, another thing to consider that in the night there's certain organs that are kind of on high duty. You get a lot of insight maybe on different issues depending on what time people wake up, like 11 to 1. If someone keeps recurrently waking up at that time, it could possibly mean a gallbladder issue. A 1 to 3 is a really interesting time because it's kind of tied into the liver, especially if people are waking up and they're sweating, they're grinding their teeth. It's a good indicator of possibly parasite infections. So if it's kind of hard to monitor yourself during sleeping if you're grinding your teeth, but if you're married or someone's watching you and they hear you, it may be a good indication something else is going on. 3 to 5 lungs, and 5 to 7 intestines, and there's other cycles people can look at, but for the most part, we're looking at sleep cycle. I just want to mention another neurotransmitter. This is a chemical messenger for the brain, dopamine. And the reason why I want to mention it is for people that deal with restless leg syndrome, there's a connection with low dopamine levels that fall off because they're not able to make dopamine and restless leg syndrome. So some people will use, well, actually, it's interesting. The two things that cause serotonin deficiency and dopamine deficiency are kind of interlinked. So we'll actually talk about that next. And the thing that really connects both serotonin and dopamine is blood sugar levels. Blood sugar is the number one thing that'll mess up your serotonin and your dopamine levels, your feel-good neurotransmitter and your joy and pleasure neurotransmitter. It will totally throw them off. And by the way, let me back up just for a second here. For dopamine, people just feel like flat, just absolutely flat. Lack of concern for family and friends. They just kind of feel hopeless. They can't finish or start tasks, and just things just feel flat. So I just wanted to make a mention of that. So on blood work, speaking of blood sugar and its effect on dopamine and serotonin, the optimal range on blood work for glucose, aka blood sugar levels, is 80 to 90. And the problem if you have a blood sugar issue is that if you can't stabilize your blood sugar, you're going to have a hormone issue, a hormone imbalance. And for everyone, it's a little bit different where that set bar is. But the first thing will happen once we have too much glucose, there's a hormone called insulin that will be pumped into the body to bring it back down. Just the body does what's called super compensation. It normally does a better job than it needs to, and it will drive that blood sugar way, way down. Matter of fact, it'll take someone from hyperglycemia or high blood sugar levels to hypoglycemia, low blood sugar. Now, think about this for a second. If you're, say tonight, if you decide, well, I'm going to eat a whole thing of ice cream right before going to bed. Well, you go to bed, and that blood sugar is creeping up. Now, insulin is going to have to pump in to get that down. You've been sleeping for a while and that blood sugar now has dropped. You're hypoglycemic. You go in metabolic shock. So your body pumps in cortisol and epinephrine. Remember, cortisol is the one that wakes you up. So a couple hours after sleeping, guess what? You're going to wake up because now your cortisol levels are raising your blood sugar back up. And this could be a major reason, again, why people wake up after a few hours of going to sleep or if they have an infection. Another thing to consider, and I have a lot of information, we will probably do maybe 2 to 3 Zoom chats on brain health. I have a lot of information about brain health, and I don't want to overwhelm you in this first talk, but I just want to talk a little about neuroinflammation, since melatonin, being that anabolic hormone, does such a great job with inflammation systemically and even neuroinflammation. But the key piece to understand is that when people have inflammation, it's one of the first signs that people are having neurodegeneration. And even with Parkinson's, it's one of the first symptoms people have. A lot of people are waiting for people to have tremors in their hands and stuff like that. But quite honestly, the first symptoms of a lot of these dementia type things is loss of smell. They can't smell peanut butter. Actually, there's actually a legit test for Parkinson's about, it's a smell test, and it has peanut butter, peppermint, and anise, which is kind of like a pepper, anise is like a licorice type smell, and they cannot smell it from a certain distance from their nose. It's actually a legit test that you can get to see, as a pre-screen for Parkinson's. Of course, constipation and things like that, rigid posture, slump, and stuff like that. But I just want to point out sleep is huge when it comes to anything neurological. Um, here's all these different chronic inflammation and disease things that can happen from inflammation. I mean, it's just such a major thing. Now, interesting from a scriptural point of view, we'll get into this more later. The scripture actually has something to say about inflammation that's really fascinating. In Deuteronomy 28 has a chapter about blessings and curses. It says, if it shall be that if you do not obey the voice of your Elohim, that all these curses shall come upon you, overtake you. So when you're reading through, and it's a long list. Matter of fact, it's nice to read Deuteronomy 28 because it has all these blessings if you are in covenant and you're obeying in your physical body. Then it has these really bad things that happen in your body if there's a breakdown of that relationship. And one of the things that's really interesting is wasting disease and inflammation, specifically listed in Deuteronomy 28:22. Again, the inflammation is tied to a lot of diseases. We'll be talking more about this later on. Here's I guess I'm going to quote myself here. In my book, actually, I just have it here on my table, Jumpstart Your Thyroid, on page, can't even see here, my little things here. Let me see if I can move this. Oh, there we go. Should I move that over here? On page 79, this is actually really important. A lot of people don't know this. Most of the blood in your brain is in the venous system, meaning it's returning back to the heart. So when you sleep, and they just discovered this back in 2000, I believe, 12. This is relatively new information. They did not know how the brain detoxifies itself. And a lot of this happens at night. So think about all the junk in your brain that needs to get out through it needs to escape. And so if you don't have proper circulation, especially the venous system, it can be like a toilet that is clogged, like cannot flush, because whether you have bad circulation or you're not getting sleep, sleep is absolutely critical for any brain issue to actually clear the junk out of your brain. So this is a major issue for children too. If they get staph infections and start acting really bizarre in their behavior and whatnot, this can be a major issue. This is also important for thyroid because if you think about it, your neck is kind of like, if you think of the brain, and the neck's kind of like this funnel going down, and it should exit. So all this stuff a lot of times gets trapped. You can get a lot of nodules and things also in the thyroid area. So that's one reason why this point is brought up. Anyways, let's keep moving along. Brain waves. You can think of your brain as having, it's like gears in a vehicle. And normally when we're waking up, the gamma waves are anywhere from 30 hertz cycles per second to, it can go super high. Beta waves are 13 to 30 hertz or cycles per second, mostly used during the wake, when you're awake. Alpha is when we start, this is the transition for sleep, which is really interesting, where you're kind of relaxed, 8 to 12.99 hertz. Cycles per second. And then theta is almost like a meditative light sleep, almost like right when you go to sleep, right when you wake up, you're kind of in theta. Then delta is kind of when you're in deep sleep, and obviously REM sleep and whatnot. And maybe at some other time I will go more in detail on all the phases of sleep and all that stuff. But for today, I don't think I'm going to do that. I want to just get right to some different ways you can kind of help your sleep. And I will have a Q&A at the end of this. So if you have questions, we can maybe talk more. But really, the first thing is just try to get to bed on time. And that's actually harder than it sounds if you're not used to having the habit of doing that, trying to get to bed. It's amazing if you get just 1 week of really good sleep. I mean, your moods and attitude, energy levels can radically change. So trying to get sleep at the ideal time can be a little bit difficult, especially this time of year when the sun goes down so um, early, at least where I live, that I'm ready for bed even right now. So, um, so I, try to get close to that. If you, it may not be a bad time to get a little extra sleep. It's probably better to get extra sleep than not enough. Now, if you notice you always need a lot more sleep, that could be also indication of different issues. I know with thyroid, people that have thyroid issues for Hashimoto's, it seems like they need like almost 10 hours of sleep. They really struggle a lot of times with their energy levels, so that can be an issue. Again, blood sugar, most of this can be done through diet. I will have a webinar too on fasting, because even with type 2 diabetes can be corrected through the right type of fasting if you know what you're doing. And it can be a game changer. There's all sorts of different types of fasts, and intermittent fasting. I mean, you could do a water fast, and it could be for how many days, and we'll get into all those details. But I just want to bring up fasting can be a game changer, and again, it's free, just like sleep. I mean, a lot of these things, if used properly, can radically change your health, and whatnot. But the next talk next month will be on diet, and how it plays a role, gut health, and food. So it will get a little bit more detail in how to stabilize blood sugar. And everyone's a slightly different in this. And when I work with people, we go through questionnaires to help try to figure out percentages of the fat, carbohydrates, and protein, and maybe even different drinks they should be doing through the day. And you don't have to get super technical, but depending on how much information you want, you can get really, really detailed. um, Another thing is get movement. And it doesn't mean you have to go buy a gym membership, but some people like to, walk. Some people like to go dancing. Some people like to do different activities. Again, we'll do a talk on this one too. Basically today I'm kind of laying out some of the things we'll be talking about in the future of how to use exercise or movement to influence our hormones, what type of movements. And I have here what's called the 7 essential movement patterns. This is what a baby does. Like if you study how babies move and whatnot, they'll start off with twisting, pushing, pulling, bending, squatting, lunging. The last thing they do is gait. And actually, the curvature on the foot, the arches, is one of the last things to develop. But if you actually watch a baby, you'll actually see them go through these different stages. It's actually really interesting. So sometimes for rehabilitation, we actually have to take someone back through from the ground up, depending on what type of injury they have, to relearn how to move, whether it be for the shoulder, hip, knee, whatever. So, anyways, we'll get more into this, but movement, just doing a little bit of movement every day can really help with sleep as well, um, especially if it's done right. There's a lot to say about this. Obviously, this is going to be kind of a unique coaching thing because it's in light of the scriptures. So I'm going to be bringing up the scriptures quite a bit, and the scriptures has a lot to say about sleep, rest, and whatnot. But there's something about Joshua 8, 1:8 that I think is important, because it says, "Do not let this book of the Torah depart from your mouth." So you're speaking it. You shall meditate on it day and night. You're thinking about it, um, so that you guard to do it according to all that is written in it. For then you shall make your way prosperous and act wisely. So it's you speak it, you think it, and you do it. And this is interesting because there was I can't even think of I think his name is William James, a psychologist, says, act the way you want. Act the way you want to be, and soon you'll become the way you act. And it's kind of almost backwards, because sometimes you don't feel like doing things. You don't feel like doing it, but if you actually start moving, your brain will catch up. I think it's interesting. This starts off with speaking it first. Speak it out loud, meditate on it, and do it. And that's where the blessing is. And there's a lot to be said about rest. I mean, the fourth commandment is like keep the Sabbath. And that's in a weekly cycle, that we need to not work 24/7 every day. But there is a cycle in creation, times where it really benefits our body. And they've done studies on this in different cultures. They've actually tried to work longer than a 7-day period and absolutely destroyed the health of different people over time. So it's really fascinating. So they went back to a 7-day week cycle, with 6 days work and a day rest. So the Shabbat is a major principle. I believe in working hard and resting hard. Yesterday, we had Shabbat, and I literally almost slept the whole entire day. I needed it because we had a full week. And the body sometimes needs a day just to relax and chill. So Joshua 1:8, I'll probably be mentioning this later on throughout, but it's a key one. Sound and light for 5 and 6 are also key things. A lot of music therapy can be really good for people that have issues going to sleep. James Block's a friend of mine. He actually does use different frequencies in his music that have been kind of tied into healing, but also just even reading, singing, and music that has scripture also can be really healing. David played for Saul and actually helped some of his spiritual issues for a while. So music, I know in our house can be a big thing. We actually use it with our children, and it does calm the house. There are other musics like whole tones. If you look up this website, um, they have all selections of non-lyric, just whole tone music, and really interesting. Some of its nature. It's been done. They've done studies with sleep to improve sleep, and we use that also in our house. And yeah, I mean, after a while, you're out. So that's another way using sound. Get natural light. It's actually kind of interesting because in the morning hours, it's important to get your eyes out in sunlight because even though melatonin is released in the evening, the production of melatonin actually happens when the sun hits our eyes. And also cortisol is released to wake us up, but melatonin production happens if we're in the presence of sunlight. Then later on in that evening, it's released. So if you have a melatonin deficiency, it could also be a sunlight issue. Um, and also at nighttime, trying to avoid artificial light as best as you can. I know I go through seasons where I'll try to get away from electronics. Obviously, my phone sometimes is close to me, so I'm not 100% on that. But I know people that they're very sensitive to electronics, very sensitive to light, and it can make a big difference in their sleep. So if that's you, that may be something to consider. Matter of fact, talking about sensitivity, 7. If A lot of the clients I work with are very sensitive to EMF and like different 5G or just different, different towers. They really feel like they can't sleep. They have brain fog and whatnot. And there are some herbs that can help with some of that a little bit. Something called takasumi, which is a bamboo charcoal. Very good with EMF, and or people have extreme food sensitivities. This is one way that I'll help or use to help them dampen that immune response and deal with EMF and whatnot, chemical sensitivities and stuff like that. Also, Aries Tech does have a device, and I actually have one on my phone somewhere here if I can find it. Actually, I don't even have my phone in there. This is one I put on my. It's kind of hard to see that. It is almost a holographic. I should probably I'll put a link to it in my email tomorrow. But it's a technology that you can put on your phone or in your house, or if you're in a place that has a lot of EMF type of stuff, it can protect for a certain amount of space. So for people that are super sensitive to that type of stuff, that is something to consider as well. Uh, Bed. And this is actually a big one for people that have back pain and neck pain as well. I've had people that have come to me for back pain or hip pain or sciatica and all this stuff. And the only thing we did was change their bed. We basically got them the bed with right firmness and their pillow height, and their sleep improved tremendously. Back pain gone. They didn't have to go, see a chiropractor, a massage therapist anymore. They didn't really even need to, exercise per se, just by getting their bed the right firmness and the pillow height right can make all the difference of getting high quality sleep. And so that could be something to consider. Number 9, temperature and ventilation. If our body uses more energy to maintain body temperature than almost anything else, so if the room is super cold or super hot, it can definitely interfere with sleep and not get high quality sleep. So trying to have that ideal temperature in the room and ventilation as well, making sure, especially in the wintertime where you don't maybe have fresh air going through, it may not be a bad idea to open the windows. I know in the warmer weather, some people that have sleep issues, if they tent outside, I know a lot of people probably don't tent that often, but if you actually get out in nature or have a PMF mat or do any of that type of grounding type stuff, it does make a big difference, or even just barefoot contact with the ground. There are benefits for the ions. Basically, for your red blood cells, it will make them negative. So if people have blood clotting issues, it can in 20 minutes of just putting their foot on the ground, it can radically change. If you would look at a live blood cell analysis or something like that in 20 minutes, I mean, it would change their blood chemistry, especially if they're dealing with clots. Well, tinning out can actually help with the fresh air. For some people, the ground may be too hard. They may need something else in the tent, but it is for a lot of people, they notice their sleep improves greatly just by getting out and a little bit more nature and stuff like that. So, and one of the last things, at least naturally speaking, address since 90% of your melatonin is actually made in your gut and only 5% in your brain. Addressing gut health can be a major issue if someone has a dysbiosis or imbalance in the microflora. There are certain strands of bacteria that really help with people that have insomnia or sleep issues. So that's something else to consider. I may have a link in the email tomorrow about that. Now, from a spiritual perspective, one of the top things, since we talked about stress, that cortisol, this is called the anti-stress hormone, anxiety and fear, maybe it's something with work or whatever it may be. From a spiritual perspective, a lot of times people are really maybe dealing with literally a spirit of fear. Maybe they've had it their whole life. And I know this one really well because I used to be terrified of just ridiculous stuff. And it wasn't normal. I mean, it would be like it just came upon and your heart starts, I mean, going crazy. Your hands get like super cold. You feel like you're going to pass out. And literally, it's a almost as the scripture says, it's a spirit of fear. Elohim has not given us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. And so, when it comes to, if you want to call it deliverance and healing, one of the things, whether someone was scared of the dark or whatever fear they had or anxiety, that needs to be addressed. And there's different ways to do that through basically through repentance, renouncing that. Like, this is ridiculous to have this fear. And I will say, since we will be doing a thing on deliverance and healing, literally the spirit needs to be cast out as well and rebuked in Messiah's name. And that is the missing piece. So just by repenting and renouncing may not be enough. The spirit itself behind that emotion needs to be cast out. And I know that's for some of you listening to me like, what are you talking about? But we're going to be getting a lot more into this later on. But I am now kind of concluding here very soon, and then we'll go to Q&A. I want to go a little beyond the physical here. So many of us believe that we're living in a very special time, that things are, as the prophecies, we're living in the last days, a lot of interesting events happening in the world. And one thing I want you to consider is that dreams and visions were prophesied to increase in the last days. And this is really important when it comes to sleep, when you think about what's being said. I'll read Acts. If you think of it, you can just remember Acts 2, Joel 2. So in Acts 2, it says, but this is what was spoken by the prophet Yoel or Joel. And it shall be in the last days, says Elohim, that I shall pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. And it's repeated again in Joel 2. So if we're living in last days, and we should be seeing an increase in dreams and visions, and realize that this is one of the ways that the Almighty speaks to us. A lot of people don't realize you'll spend 1/3 of your life sleeping, and you may not realize it, but this is a major way the Almighty speaks to us, because there's a lot of scriptures on this. For El does not speak once or twice, or El does speak once or twice, though one does not notice it. A lot of times we have dreams and not maybe not realize there's a message there in a dream. Now, I'm not saying all dreams are from Elohim. It could be a pizza dream or whatnot, or just a really weird dream. But this may make you think a little bit more about your dreams. It may be a communication to help you. In a dream, in a vision of the night when deep sleep falls upon men while slumbering on the bed, then he opens the ears of men and seals their instruction. There's a lot of things he gives them in dreams and visions. And I'm just going to mention a few of them here in a second, but I wanted to point out something. The Hebrew day starts at evening. And why this is so interesting is that um, if you think of the day starting at evening and you go to sleep, then the first part of the day is an opportunity. And I actually pray almost every night. Yeah, if you pray you send a dream or or vision, and basically communicate with me during this time, since there's no distractions during that time. So every day you can start off with communication with Almighty with no distractions. So this is kind of interesting when you consider when a Hebrew day starts. And so let me there's a Song of Songs. I was sleeping, but my heart was awake. Even though our physical body sleeps, our spirit man almost wakes up. And this is why I think the Almighty actually speaks during that time. In the book of Corinthians, chapter 12, First Corinthians chapter 12, it talks about spiritual gifts. These are not all of them. They're the nine, some people would say some of the main ones. Some of them are called revelation gifts, the first three. Then you have your power gifts. Then we have some people say the mouth gifts or proclamation gifts, words of not like basically words of knowledge or word of knowledge, word of wisdom, stirring of spirits, faith, healing, working of miracles, prophecy, tongues or languages, interpretation of tongues. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, the piece of information that the Almighty gives us in our sleep can be a word of knowledge, a special piece of information, or a word of wisdom, a discerning spirit, or a prophecy in our sleep. And I just want to show you a few examples in the scripture just real quick. You may have, these are famous stories. We know that Joseph, probably the dreamer of dreams, is very well known for this. And in Genesis 41, it's written that Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there's no one interpret it. Now I myself have heard it said of you that you understand a dream and to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not me. Let Elohim answer Pharaoh with peace. So Joseph is someone who had insight from the Almighty about interpreting someone else's dream, not even his own, someone else's. And the same thing is true with Daniel. And we read this in Daniel 2, after Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, he didn't even let people know what the dream was. At least Pharaoh told them the dream. Daniel had to get the dream and the interpretation. And this is what Daniel says in Daniel 2. I'm trying to move my thing around here so I can read this. Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. Now watch this. So it was a night vision that revealed the dream of Nebuchadnezzar to Daniel. So this is why visions and dreams are you'll see this go back and forth in the scriptures. And Daniel blessed Elah of the heavens. And Daniel responded and said, blessed be the name of Allah, Elah, forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings or sovereigns, raises up sovereigns. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who possess understanding. He reveals deep and secret matters. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank you and praise you, O Elah, of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and might, have now made known to me what we ask of you, for you have made known to us the sovereign's matter. So basically, he got the dream and the interpretation. Obviously, it's this picture over here. Well, it's kind of a summation of it: the head of gold, the arms and chest of silver, the belly and thighs of bronze, the legs of iron, and the feet of iron and clay, represents the kingdoms of the earth, that they basically would, how they would come, but the stone, Aben stone, father son stone, would come out, crush the image, would grow into a great mighty mountain representing the kingdom of Yah. So Daniel was basically given a prophecy of the entire world history in a night vision, to answer Nebuchadnezzar's dream. So this is really cool. A few more examples. I may not read the whole thing here, but one of the wisest men that wisest man that ever lived got an impartation of wisdom, and not just a word of wisdom like in First Corinthians, but the spirit of basically wisdom, like the one of the seven spirits of Yah mentioned in Isaiah chapter 11. Given Yahuwah appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and Elohim asked, or said, "Ask what I should give you." Basically, he was going to give him anything he wanted. Long story short, let me get a drink of water here. Excuse me. Basically, Solomon had just, I'll be honest with you, he gave a huge offering and basically laid, I mean, at no expense. He basically blessed Yah, and he came to him in the night in this dream and said, "Ask me whatever you want. I'm gonna basically give it to you." And Solomon asked for wisdom. He basically said, "I'm a child. How do I lead these people?" So not only does he grant, this was good in the eyes of Yah, and he granted him wisdom to lead the people, but he gave him all this other stuff as well, riches and stuff like that. And it says in verse 15, and Solomon awoke and see it was a dream. Do you understand that Solomon was imparted with wisdom and all this in a dream? I don't think people understand that. It wasn't even, he was awake. This all happened in a dream. This was imparted to him. It's like absolutely incredible. Then Joseph in the New, this is not just an Old Testament thing, it's a New Testament thing. And this can have, obviously, at the end of the age, this should be increasing more and more. Obviously, Joseph, the husband of Mary, multiple times has dreams that warned him of what was to come. Um, and this is really neat. I'll read this real quick. We're about to the end here for Q&A. But the birth of Yahushua Messiah was as follows. After his mother Miriam was engaged to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be pregnant from the set apart spirit. And Joseph, her husband, being righteous and not wishing to make a show of her, had in mind to put her away secretly. But while he thought about this, see, a messenger of Yahuwah appeared to him in a dream, saying, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Miriam or Mary as your wife, for that which is in her was brought forth from the set apart spirit. And she shall give birth to a son, and you shall call his name Yahushua, for he shall save his people from their sins." Notice, Yahuwah appeared to him in a dream. And again, this happens multiple times. He's warned here. And actually, the wise men are also warned right at the beginning here. And having been warned in a dream that they should not return to Herodias, but depart for their own country by another way. So the wise men were warned in a dream. Now Joseph is going to be warned in a dream. Then, and when they had left, see, the messenger of Yahuwah appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, "Arise, take the child, his mother, and flee to Mitzrayim, and remain there until I bring word. For Herodias is about to seek the child to destroy it. And rise up, and rising up, he took the child and his mother by night and departed from Mitzrayim, and remained there until the death of Herodias, to fulfill what was spoken by Yahuwah through the prophets, saying, Out of Mitzrayim I have called my son." Notice this, how obedient Joseph was to have a dream, to get up in the middle of the night and to go. I don't think we understand how important dreams are. Literally, he understood this was from Yah. He needed to get up right now and go. I wonder how many people would be that are in that clear understanding of communication in their dream. Notice Joseph didn't even have the spirit, the ruach inside of him at this point. It had not been yet given. We're at it. We have an advantage over even Joseph. But notice how obedient he was to rise up at by night and depart from Mizraim. And another dream. Herodes, having died, see the messenger who appeared in a dream to Joseph in Mizraim, saying, "Arise, take the child's mother and go into the land of Israel. For those who seek the child are dead." And rising up, he took the child and mother and came into the land of Mizraim. Joseph had another dream, but hearing the Archelaus was reigning over Yehuda instead of his father Herodias, he was afraid to go there, and having been warned in a dream, departed to the parts of Galilee. So we can see that throughout the scripture, and there's more examples of visions and dreams and all that stuff, words of knowledge. But this is just one way the Almighty communicates with us. And what's really important is to realize this. In Messiah are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And the interesting thing is, Messiah talks about when he goes, he is better that he goes so the helper can come to us, which is really the spirit of truth, the spirit of Yah inside of us. And I just want to read these. I think this is one of the last slides. If you love me, you shall guard my commands, and I shall ask the Father, he shall give you another helper to stay with you forever, the spirit of truth, whom the world is unable to receive because it does not see him or know him, but you know him, for he stays with you and shall be in you. John 14, 15 through 17. Also in John is loaded, by the way. If you read John 14 through 17, all about the Ruach, the Spirit. But when he comes, the Spirit of truth, he shall guide you into all the truth. He does not speak from himself, but whatever he hears, he shall speak, and he shall announce to you what is to come. And he shall esteem me, for he shall take of what is mine and announce it to you. So the Spirit of truth is, that spirit that is announcing what is to come. And in 1 John 2:20, it's written, "And you have an anointing from the set apart one and know all." Now, what it means, like what I really think that means is that if the spirit of Messiah, the very spirit that raised Messiah from the dead, dwells in us, and Messiah in him is hidden all the treasures of knowledge and wisdom, that we do have access to know, like just like even Joseph, and to have access, words of knowledge, words of wisdom of what is to come. And I believe there's ways to, obviously with the spiritual gifts, to be just in tune with the Almighty to help direct our life. So dreams are one of the easiest ways, because there's no distractions a lot of times, to start hearing the voice of the Almighty. John 10:27 says, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." And this is just one of the ways the Almighty communicates with us, is through dreams and visions. There's many other ways, but obviously His Word. But this is very important, I think, for the days ahead. I may have to do a separate teaching later on if you want to say dream interpretation, or look at the different types of dreams, and maybe some helping people maybe understand dreams a little bit. I actually have a journal coming out here very soon, since Passover is not that far off. It'll be called a Joseph journal, and it will have all the appointed times with the Roman dates too, so you'll know what's going on. It'll start at the first day of the first month, and it'll go all the way around this coming year, 2024, going into 2025. The Hebrew year will actually have 13 months, and it'll go all the way through. But it'll be, actually, the reason why I was making this is for myself and my family, but I thought maybe other people may want it. But what it will have a space to write down your dreams, your visions, your scriptures, your praises. And so if you're prayed about somebody or for something, you can go back and try to figure it out. Since I have notebooks and my phone, notes on my phone and notes everywhere, this will hopefully consolidate a lot of my prayers, scripture readings, dreams, all in one thing with the appointed times to know, oh, well, that happened on that day. Wow, that's interesting. So, anyways, that'll be coming out here soon. But yeah, that's, I think, the last slide.